Have you ever scratched your brain for ages trying to think of a cool and unique paint scheme for your models? Have you ever struggled with the idea of your cool little spacemens looking the exact same as everyone else's cool little spacemens? Maybe you really love a popular scheme, but you're intimidated by the level of detail that is required to execute on it. It requires too much skill or effort, and maybe you just really don't want to do that. Maybe you just plain don't want to paint your models in a normal way. Hi, I'm Gino the Painting Acolyte, and today I'm going to be encouraging you to paint differently. In today's video, we're going to talk about painting ice elementals, cool miniatures that look like they're made out of ice. A while back, I had a random idea to paint something unique and different. I had seen some models online that incorporated the use of Crackle Paint in the paint scheme itself, and I was really interested and wanted to do something with it. Now, one thing about me is that I am a slut for theme and aesthetic, way more so than technical skill or painting level or execution or anything like that. Cool theme, I'm there. I wanted to try and paint something that was cool and interesting, even if it was technically sloppy. I also had a bunch of Flesh Eater Quartz models that I needed to get painted, and I wasn't really super jazzed about just painting regular roll undead flesh, which is something that I do quite often. Enter the Ice Elemental. An important step in painting differently is to do tests. Do test models. Experiment. Sometimes the test models that you work on end up being the finished products themselves, and you're perfectly fine from the get-go. That doesn't often happen, though. Other times, you have to do more work. To start off with, I primed a couple of models white and did some airbrushing and painting of various blues on the models. My thinking was that if I had a sort of bluish patterned undercoat and I had some white Crackle paint on top, it would look like cracked ice with like a deep blue, like watery blue underneath it. Makes sense, right? I have some of this golden Crackle Paste, which is white out of the jar, and I wanted to give it a spin and see if it would create the result that I was hoping for on these models. I mixed it with some blue to give a bit of a nice color variation, and I was thinking I had to hit it with a white dry brush afterwards. Unfortunately, this stuff didn't really work out like how I wanted it all. This moment of critical failure is when you shift from the mode of trying to get a model painted into the scientific method experiment test mode. I hope you remember scientific method from your grade school science classes. I thought, maybe the paint that I mixed into the Crackle Paste messed it up somehow, so I applied it straight from the jar to see if that had any effect. As it turns out, this kind of material really doesn't work well on the scale of the models that we're painting. It's great for bases or diorama projects, but it's technically like a fine art product, so it's more for like creating cool textures on canvas painting or something like that. But on the minis that I wanted to paint, it was a bit of a bust. So it was time to knuckle down and get to business and do more testing. I got a bunch of different crackle effect type paints from a bunch of different brands, and I set out to figure out the perfect way to make the models exactly how I envisioned them. I did a battery of tests on some junky models that I keep around for exactly this purpose to figure out what exactly I needed to do to get these models looking right. I had Green Stuff World Crackle Paint, I had AK Interactive Crackle Medium, and I had Vallejo Crackle Medium, in addition to the regular Crackle Paste that I already had. I've also used Games Workshop's Crackle Paints before, so I already knew how they would work and how they would operate, so I didn't do any testing on those. I used these different products and I applied them on the models straight from the bottle or the jar. I mixed them together, I mixed them with paints or inks. I did a whole lot of different experimenting to see how these things operated and how their finished products would look. Ultimately though, things weren't really going to plan, at least not how I had envisioned it before. Some of the pain of painting differently is that when you're doing new and unique and interesting ideas, there's usually not a lot of online resources to help you figure out your problems. There's not a lot of useful knowledge to go to about slathering your models in Crackle Paint because it's not something that people do very often. These miniatures have insane details for how small they are, and a lot of people buy these expensive toys because they want to see the cool details. Pretty crazy, huh? So it's pretty easy to become disheartened when things aren't working out well. But we press on, and we continue, for science. It became obvious that my original plans as I envisioned them just weren't going to work out no matter what. But with some time spent cooking up ideas in my head, I eventually came up with something that would work. Here's how it goes. First, we assemble a model. And before we prime the model, we varnish it. Now this is a super weird step, and technically you could prime it and then apply the crackle paste and then prime it again. But the whole thing is that we're applying the crackle paint and then priming over it to get the color that we want. So using varnish instead of a first layer of prime, I found, just helps preserve more details. I specifically use a matte varnish, the most matte that I can find, because in my testing I found that the crackle paint really gets nice, gnarly, big chunky cracks on matte surfaces, more so than gloss or satin or anything else. When the model's varnished, we slather on our crackle paint. In my testing, for my purposes, I found that the Green Stuff World crackle paint worked the best. It came in a big bottle, it had a dropper bottle, it was easy to use and worked like regular paint. It made some really nice cracks. The different mediums all performed differently and had different effects, so if you want to try it out for yourself, I would recommend experimenting as well, but using the Green Stuff World crackle paint worked really well for me. The thicker we lay this paint on, the chunkier and deeper and more interesting the cracks will get on the finished product, so we vary it around a lot on the model to get lots of different textures all over the thing. Once that's applied, you can either let it dry by itself, or if you really want to speed up the process and create some really funky cracks, you can hit it with a hairdryer on some low or even high heat. It can create some really interesting effects, but it can also chip off a little bit, so do it at your own risk. Once all the crackle paint is all good and dry, we prime over the entire thing with a bit of white paint, maybe with a little bit of a blue mixed in there to get a nice, like, icy blue tone. Once we're all primed in icy blue-white, we mix up a contrast ink paint concoction and we slather it all over the whole model to get the blue into the cracks that we originally wanted, as well as just tone the whole model into the kind of cooler, more interesting color that we want. When I do this kind of thing, I usually just eyeball it with no real recipe in mind, so I just mixed some blue ink, some cyan ink, some fluorescent blue ink, and then a bunch of contrast medium in there and mix it until it gets about the consistency that I want. You want it to be a little bit thinner than regular contrast paint, so you get a little bit more of the white highlight on it. But once it's all mixed up to your specifications, you just paint the whole model over. The next step was a whole lot of dry brushing. To give us back that white ice look with like the blue underneath the cracks and underneath the ice, we do a lot of heavy dry brushing. We work our way up from a cyan blue to a bit of a more icy white blue, until eventually we get to a pure white. Start with something that's a little bit of a darker, deeper blue than what you think you need, and then just progressively add more of an icy blue and then white until eventually you get to just pure white. Dry brushing is really the key to our success. It gives us nice color variation of the model and gives us those nice, deep blue cracks that we really want. Like a lake that's frozen over with the water underneath it only barely visible through the cracks. And you can be really imprecise with this dry brushing too. Just go crazy. Heavy-handed. Don't really worry about technique or skill or anything like that. Remember, painting differently means themes and aesthetic over technical painting skill. As I was getting this icy elemental look down and I was really satisfied with it and I was getting excited, I also had another idea. I thought that these models in a group would probably end up kind of all blending together if they were pretty much just the same thing over and over, same color all the way through kind of thing, and I wanted to add some pop of color and something interesting to them. So I did some thinking and I had another painting differently idea. What if I made the faces and the backs of these vampire ice elemental zombie monsters glowing red hot, like they were powered by some kind of infernal magic inside them that was spewing out of their faces and through their backs, like a hot engine that was covered in ice. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it looks cool and that's what matters. For this, I ultimately really just followed the same steps that I use in my painting lava guide that I've posted for painting lava on bases. Pretty much the same steps, just on a different portion of the model. Ultimately, something like this might seem a little intimidating, but again, this is all about experimenting and going with the flow, so don't be intimidated. Don't worry if you mess up. You can always go back and redo it. Be loose and be free, and you'll get to a result that you like, I promise. And that's how to paint some cool miniatures that are made out of ice. The cool thing about this scheme is that since it's less of a paint by the steps guide, for your regular army scheme, it's a kind of recipe that you can apply to really anything that you would want. I can imagine all sorts of armies that would look really cool if you painted them up as ice elementals. Maybe you want to do an interesting take on your Thousand Sons 40k army, or Tyranids. And there's all sorts of different fantasy things that you can paint up to look like they're made out of ice, with the hot backs or not. I really encourage you to try it out on anything that you think would look cool with it. Painting differently is scary and intimidating, but what I really want you to get from this video, beyond just a cool scheme to use on your models, is that it's really important to experiment and test and have fun and do something different. And you don't need to shy away from themes or ideas that you think would look really cool on your models just because they might not be the most technically sound or skillful or impressive schemes to use. Who cares? They're your models, and if they look cool and they're fun, then that's what matters. And painting differently is very fun. That's all for today, folks. I hope you liked this video and you found it useful, and I hope that it inspired you to go out there and paint differently. Let me know down in the comments below if you have anything that you think would look cool using the scheme, or if you have any other cool examples of painting differently that you'd like to share with the class. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that stuff, and it really means a lot to me that you're watching and you're hanging around. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Gino the Painting Acolyte, and I'll see you next time. Take care, and bye-bye.